Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 40 of Rise Up the Podcast. I'm here with your host, Greg Grenlin, and special guest this week, Dan Alexander, also known as Neuby Talks, coming in live from PLL Bets studio, helping us out, break down the lines, what we saw last week, and hopefully get some winners for next week and make some money. And talk about lacrosse, some things we all love, lacrosse, making money. But before we get into that, I'll start with the new guy. You know, he was on a couple weeks ago when I wasn't here, but Dan, how you doing, man? You know, good to see you. Glad to be on with you, man. This is going to be a blast.
Absolutely, and I had to reach the Danny contingent. You know what I mean? You were off, so they were like, "We got to go out. We got to find someone named Dan." So Greg was slumming it with me a couple weeks. So I'm glad you're back, brother. This is great.
No, we're pumped to have you, man. I listened to that episode that you guys did together at work one day, and it got me through the workday. So it was awesome. It was a pleasure. So now I'm glad to be on here chopping it up with you. And Greg, how you doing, man? You have a good weekend? It's been a week since we last talked.
Yeah, I've had a good weekend. I was actually relaxed a little bit. I went out to Team 91 North side, their Upgrade the West event, and they do a phenomenal job. They are really doing a great job of building lacrosse in the Boulder area. And it was awesome. I mean, at this point in the summer, to have over 100 kids show up for a one-day combine was pretty cool. I was out there with Tommy Schreiber was there, Adam Gittleman. So it was pretty cool. So now I'm excited to be back and ready to rock and roll.
And you said you flew in and out of Denver, right? You got a chance to catch the games or not? Didn't fit in the schedule?
No, I mean, Boulder's about 40 minutes away from Denver. And the week before, as you remember, I was away all week for lacrosse camp. Yep. So I couldn't wait to get back home. I needed a weekend with the boys.
Absolutely. I hear you there. I had a nice, relaxing weekend out at the beach. No complaints from me. Summer's winding down, trying to get as much sun as possible so I can keep this nice tan rolling into the fall.
Good on you, man.
Yeah, but, I mean, fellas, last week, awesome games. I think we had a little bit of everything. We had some close games. We had some not so close games, some good comebacks. We'll go sequentially in order from the first game of the weekend to the last game of the weekend. And, the first game was Whips versus Chaos. Whips 12, Chaos 10. And we spoke about this a few weeks ago. And Dan, I'd love to get your opinion. I think when the Whips were sitting at one win, I think they've ripped off 3 in a row. When they're sitting at one win, I said you'd be silly not to throw a future on them at this point. We know they're going to get healthy. We know their pedigree. And just like that, they punched their ticket this weekend.
No, I couldn't agree more with you, man. Like that was something that I was waiting for. You know what I mean? Like that's when you look at the Whips, you're always waiting for that other shoe to drop. You know what I mean? And it's funny that they punch their ticket against the Chaos because while they have two completely different style of plays, as far as their trajectory over these last few seasons, it's kind of been similar where it's just like, hey, let's just get into the dance, and then once we do that, let's wreak some havoc. So I wasn't shocked to see that they've turned it around. They actually haven't lost since the All-Star break, and a lot of it, I just think has to do with the moving parts that they had heading into the season. I always try and look at these teams that had the little hangover from the NLL into the PLL, and this is always a team that's going to be affected because of the high-level players they have. But surprised to see that the Whip Snakes are rolling? No, not even a little bit. And I think they're the kind of team you do not want to be seeing at this second half of the year, and the 3 straight they ripped off, I think, indicates that.
It's funny. You and I were talking last week. I think the biggest layup of all time was Whip Snakes at +1.5 last week.
Free.
I couldn't believe I was getting that line. I hammered that.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more, Greg. Like I was thinking the same thing. I was like, how are they not going to have this spot just be absolutely a slam for them? So sometimes they're that easy, but I think we know, Greg, they're not always that easy, unfortunately.
Yeah, we got a little lucky this week. But yeah, I think so. The Whip Snakes are not the Whip Snakes from the first 4 or 5 games of this season. The Whip Snakes remind me of last year and the year before. They're winning draws. They're playing great defense. Brad Smith is a huge difference maker as well. That offense seems to be getting back in its groove. And from a goaltending standpoint, they lost Burlor, but things are going well back there. So holding a Chaos team to 10 is really impressive. But even more impressive is scoring 12 on Blaze Reardon. So that means things are clicking.
Yeah, Krebs has done a fantastic job filling in for Bernlohr in between the pipes. And something else I'd like to point out, I think earlier on in the season, um, Dordovic had a long leash, and they were letting him kind of do whatever he wanted out there. And I mean, he's super talented, and they were letting him be a volume shooter. Now that some of the pieces are back, Zed Williams, Brad Smith, I don't know if it's a coaching decision or the player or just Dordovic realizing that he's a piece to a whole, and he's letting the game come to him a little bit more. He's not taking as many shots. The shots he is taking, they're way more high percentage. He shot 2 for 3 this weekend, or excuse me, one for 3. But the one goal was a 2-pointer. So I mean, that's the production that the Whips need from him. They don't need him to go, 5 goals in a game. They just need him to play his role, and I think he's doing a fantastic job of adapting to that through the season, which can be tough for a rookie.
Well, you also made a great point. I mean, the reason was they were missing a whole bunch of guys, and I think in a league where you just can't be dead last in order to make the playoffs, I think you can give a talented rookie like that a little bit of a leash. Say, look, we're going to go out there and we're going to try and score without some of our guys, and then now that everybody's back. By the way, when you said Zed Williams versus Jack Rowlett, yo, you could see that from space. That matchup. That's a lot of meat,
dude. And then when the slash occurred, I guess it was the follow through that ended up putting the imprint on Rowlett. You could literally see the mesh. Like that is a hell of a follow through.
Well, it's funny. There's one
intensity.
There's one matchup where Zed gets topside and Rowlett is playing fundamental footwork, defense, and then all of a sudden that stopped working because he got crossed up. And then you just see him go, shit, never mind, and just throws like a backhanded slash that knocks the ball out. And it's like, when in doubt, turn it back into Rowlett and just be mean about it. And it was a great battle.
And Danny, one other thing that I just wanted to get your guys' take on as far as the Whips go, because you guys both played. You played at a high level. So how much, because the last game that they actually lost was the game when Bernlohr went down, and where we saw the Krebs come in. He was struggling, and that you could argue is why the Water Dogs were able to get that win those few weeks ago. But is there any potential win one for the Gipper kind of going on? Because it does seem like there's been a ratchet up play, or that could just kind of be anecdotal at best.
Well, I'll tell you what I've seen and what I give Bernlohr credit for, and just speaks kind of as a whole to the PLL and the culture. He's on the sidelines on the games in Denver.
You rarely saw that in the MLL.
Exactly.
Fair.
If you were heard in the MLL, you would go off to the beach. You weren't traveling to Denver.
It's like a sigh of relief almost.
Exactly. And because if you're injured, you're still getting paid. And
that could be.
Both dollars. You were getting paid $50.
He's another coach on the sidelines, and he has the iPad. He's
good point.
Pointing out to Krebs, who's a young goalie, like what he's seeing, helping him out. He's like at the height of the goalie position. He's in the same conversation as Blaze every year, Jack Kelly every year. He was probably the odd man out on that Team USA roster. But that just aspect of it is so huge, I think, and just speaks to the league in general.
Yeah, I agree with you. I also think that it's less about win one for the Gipper and more about having all the pieces there and the confidence of okay, now you're all in big trouble. I remember when 2015 when we had Rabel and we had Rob and we had this loaded roster and we were just humming along, killing everybody. And at the All-Star break, we were undefeated. And then Paul actually had a foot issue that season, so he sat out 2 games. And we lost both games. And it was because our offense was kind of we know we're good, but this was not what we've been practicing. This is not the same sets. You can't just put anybody in there to replace the best midfielder at the time in the world. So then he came back, and then we rolled off more wins. So I think one of those things is when Brad Smith shows up, when Zed Williams, you're oh, we just go back to what we were doing before, which was being the best team in the league.
No, yeah, all great points. This Whips team is rolling. I will be keeping my money where the Whips are, and we'll talk about that later when we preview next week's games. But let's roll right along to the next game on the docket. We had Archers keeping the train rolling and just smacking the Chrome 13-5. This Chrome team, we said it last week, fit Brennan O'Neill up for a Chrome jersey. They just look and it's tough because I've been very vocal about how much I love watching the Chrome play, and I think their trajectory was rising up from where they were to where they were last year, and then even the championship series when they won it. But now this year they're just out of sorts. They can't find a groove on offense. I think back-to-back weeks they've only scored 5 goals. For a professional lacrosse team, that's just unacceptable. And they just, like I said, they looked frustrated. You saw how it was getting chippy this game. It was a pretty chippy weekend in general. A lot of tensions, but this game I like the Chrome, so I stay away from betting against them. But I mean, another easy win, you could say. This Archers team, it was that 2.5 spread. I know Greg said he didn't want to touch it because 2.5, but I mean,
yeah, I was lying. I went heavy on that game. I went heavy on that spread, dog. But I will say, Connor Farrell was inserted back in the lineup, and we were talking last week about how when you're going against another faceoff guy, you got to put Connor Farrell out there. And he actually went 60% against Mike Sisselberger, who has been far and away the second best faceoff guy in the league this year. And the turnovers were way down. They actually had less turnovers than the Archers. So, kudos to Connor Farrell. It's not easy to sit out a couple weeks in professional lacrosse and come back in and be in rhythm against the other 6 or 7 best guys in the world. So kudos to him. Lone bright spot, though. I mean, they got shelled, and they get beat on. They're getting beat. It's not like you don't look at it and go, their offense is – dude, this is like the entire thing is not working, the whole team. And I know that, there's guys on this team that have been doing this for a while that are not psyched about this. And you got to be careful because, I mean, we didn't see any shakeup in the lineup for a trade. I was kind of surprised. I don't know exactly where they go because it doesn't seem like anything's working. Now, Sibes, do you think they didn't trade because they're like, look, we like our locker room. We have to be better execution-wise? Or do you say, if we lose and have Brendan O'Neill next year, it's not like the worst thing?
So I think from every time we've had a Chrome player on here, they always speak about that locker room and how much they love each other, and they're kind of like a bunch of goofballs, and they're all having a good time. And they're big like meatheads, like with Heacock and then Hanley and Farrell. But Hanley didn't dress this week. I know he's had trouble kind of getting in a groove, and I think it's not as much of a product of him, but more of just a product of the team not being able to get a groove. And he kind of has to, get the brunt of it, where they expect a lot out of him early on as a rookie, and that can be tough. So, they pick up Jesse King. He's been, playing pretty decent for them. But
he had a goal and an assist. I mean, that's almost half their points.
Yeah, the production just in general is just, it's not where they need it to be. We talked about, they dropped Dylan Malloy, weird move. They're letting the roster kind of play it out as they are. Maybe that they can figure out a way to click. But, I mean, you saw that play when Ambler crease dove and started a little scruffle. I think that's just, the frustration on the season coming out.
Yeah.
1,000%. I thought the exact same thing. When you were watching it, like that was really, if anything, that whole little scuffle actually at least got me feeling like, all right, well, at least the Chrome have something left that they're playing for, because it's starting to get into that part of the year where, just like you guys said, it gets to be that, for who, for what, where I think no one's going to go out there and be selling a bag or anything like that, but you do start thinking about next year. You do start thinking about that you had the extra, stress of playing in the championship series, and how much is smelling in themselves coming into this year has to do with what we're seeing, and maybe them trying to replicate what worked in sixes not working in this field style. So I think there's a whole confluence of reasons why this team is where they are, but to be at a scoring differential of -31, I mean, that tells you everything you need to know. It is bigger than just we're not able to get points on the board. Because honestly, defensively, it's not like they're horrible. Like 95 scores allowed. It's not like that's awful, but they just can't find a way to put winning lacrosse together. Like there's little moments that are there with the Chrome, but then once one thing goes wrong, everything starts to snowball. And it was evidenced by look at how great Scanoni played to start the game. And then some goals start going in, the scuffle happens, and he just absolutely falls apart and the game's done.
Yeah.
So it's always that little straw that breaks the camel's back, it seems like, with this team, and that's been on the field and off the field is what it seems like from a fan perspective.
Yeah, and you're right. It is a dangerous time. You got 2 games left, and like you said, this is
who are they leaping? You know what I mean? Like this is the game. If you want to leap, who are they leaping?
Statistically, when you look at goal,
the Atlas.
I know,
listen,
which is wild.
But here's the thing, though: is statistically, you're right. Second best defense in the league as far as scores against.
Yeah.
But they have almost 40 less goals than the Atlas, who are second to last. And they have half the differential. And you're right. They play the Atlas. They're gonna play the Atlas one more time, right?
Yep, I believe so.
And I've already said I think the Atlas take that game easily. And when you look at the Atlas, if it weren't for the Chrome, the Atlas would remind me of last year's Cannons, where they're in every single game. They just can't get over the hump half the time. And I also think the 32-second shot clock totally nerfed the Atlas this year. I mean, if it wasn't for that, I think the Atlas and the Archers would be top in this league 100%. But, I don't think the Atlas are going to have an issue with the Chrome.
So quickly, the Chrome finish out with the Redwoods next week, and the last week the Chrome play the Chaos. So the Atlas and
so they're done the
Chrome
Atlas. They're done with the Atlas. Okay.
Done, and then the Atlas play the Redwoods, and the Atlas play the Cannons.
Okay.
And then I don't know what happens
so we'll see
if
how
there's
it
a
goes.
head-to-head tiebreaker.
Yeah, I mean, so it
Head
would
to
have
head
to
goes
be
to scoring
obviously
differential.
Yeah, it would go to scoring differential, and that's the thing is that Chrome isn't leaping Atlas. You know what I mean? So you
Unless
need
the
if
Atlas
you're
drop 2 and
Chrome,
the
you
Chrome win
basically
2.
essentially
Yeah.
that's what you need. Like,
Which
that's
would be
exactly what you
unbelievable
need.
because if you guys remember in 2019, the Atlas were up a game on us, and the score differential tiebreaker, they had like a +7 on us, and we went out and beat the Chrome in the last game of the season by like 12. And I remember Paul and all the other Atlas players watching our game, and Trevor was like, we literally had to walk. We had to leave. Like, we couldn't believe this is happening. So unless it's something historic like that, I don't see this happening. I actually don't remember, since the inception of the PLL, there being a team that is so definitively last place. Like, when you look at this whole roster, if you said take the money line in any possible game, I wouldn't hesitate to absolutely take any team but the Chrome.
I
think I'm with you.
I think the Cannons last year got way more shit for being a one-win team than the Chrome are getting
Agreed.
this year.
Because Lyle was on the team.
Yes.
Because
You're
Lyle
absolutely
Thompson
right.
was on the team.
Because Lyle was on the
You know what
team,
I mean?
and that was the
Yeah.
story. Also, to be honest, I think the 32-second clock has taken a lot of pressure off a lot of these guys because it's literally all they talk about the entire broadcast. So,
And Greg, I have one more question for you before we move on to the next game. You mentioned it kind of at the beginning when you were breaking down, talking about Connor Farrell's performance. Does this game almost validate for you that facing off isn't the problem? It's not, you don't have to go prevent to try to win these games. It's not the problem. You kind of check that box where, hey, we got the ball, but we're not doing anything with it.
yeah, I think it checks both boxes because I understood why Suits tried it one game because it worked for the Water Dogs. The Chrome have a very formidable defense, and Connor honestly was just turning the ball over a ton. So I think if he comes and you lose those games easily anyway, he comes back and goes 60% with barely any turnovers, and you still get smashed. So yeah, I think it checked both boxes. Okay, Connor's not the problem, and we are not a prevent team because we just don't have the offense to counterpunch after playing defense. So yeah, I think Chrome have a whole basket of issues. One of them is not Connor Farrell.
Absolutely. And let's move right along to our next game. We talked about the prevent. We saw it here. Water Dogs 14, Atlas 11. I spoke last week that I don't like betting against Trevor, and it's not just because I have Greg on the podcast, and he's such a high praiser of him. I played against Trevor for 4 years, and I've been losing at his hand for far too many times to bet against him. So I mean, whenever I get a chance to bet Atlas, I'm going to take them. And they let me down a little bit. I feel like I've lost all my losses this year. Not all of them, but I think over 50% of my losses this year have been betting the Atlas. I thought they turned a corner a couple weeks ago, but it's just they're right there, and I feel like that's what we said about the Cannons last year. They're right there. They're losing these games close. You guys mentioned how many goals they're scoring and their goal differential. They're right there. They're going to be dangerous come playoffs. I think they're still going to be a threat, but what's missing? Do you think from this Atlas team that's going to make them, get to that next point, or are the Water Dogs just still, reigning champs? They're just better than them.
I think for me, at least, as far as this matchup went, it was just the lack of polls that constantly popped up for Atlas throughout the week. Most notably, missing Gavin Adler, because I think really what lost them this game, it had nothing to do with the face-off. It had nothing to do with, championship pedigree for the Water Dogs. For me, it seemed like it was just one-on-one matchups, because if you think about what happened in the first quarter, in the first quarter, Mikey Sowers already has a hat trick. Yeah. And how much of that was not being able to just have Adler just, take him out of the equation. And then the part that really killed him at the end of the game was when they let Kieran McCardle score 3 straight goals to start the fourth quarter. Because before that, Miles Jones scores a goal and the Atlas have something to get excited about. And now we're rolling a little bit. And then it was just bang, bang, bang. So I think it was all matchup based this week. And also, I know this is a safe space, guys, so I have to fucking rant for a second about the bad beat of all beats. I mentioned Sauer's hat trick in the first quarter. His point total in this game was 3.5. So after the first quarter, my dumbass tweets out, "Sorry to anyone who took any Mikey Sowers unders. Oh yeah, like victory lapping," and he doesn't get a point the rest of the game.
That's why we call it betting, baby.
All time. So I apologize to anyone on Mikey Sowers overs this week. Direct your hate mail to me. It is 1,000% the Neuby mush that ended up having us lose that.
I love that. I love that.
Brutal.
No, I think you're absolutely right about that. By the way, shout out to Walker, dude. He had 6 points. And shout out to Trevor Baptiste, who had his first ever hat trick. He did exactly what I've been saying that faceoff guys should be doing against the prevent. You have the moves, you have the speed, just burn the guy forward and score. And Trevor's showing that you can do that. But yeah, I think, for me, I was only going to take the money line on the Dogs. Because the Atlas are still good enough where they can beat anybody, in my opinion, on any day. And I totally agree with you. I think the one-on-one matchups, guys were getting beat, and they were able to feed right away with their hands clear. And I think the option to shoot or pass was there after every initial dodge, which in the pro game, you're screwed. There's no way to beat that. Yeah. And it was actually happening consistently enough where I'm actually surprised it was only a 3-goal game. Because they also blanked the Water Dogs in the entire third quarter. Yep. So the Water Dogs actually had a hiccup. If you really look at this game, it was the first and fourth quarter where the Dogs really had an advantage. Yep. The middle of the game was actually owned by the Atlas. So this is what I talk about when I say, Chrome dead last. Atlas are in there because they're competitive every game. And you're like you said, they're missing Adler in this game.
So back, that's a great point, Neuby, about Adler missing. That makes me go back to think about how does Pressler feel right now about letting Cade Van Raphorst just walk? Not even trading him, not getting anything in return, just letting him walk.
Doesn't look good. It doesn't look good, right? Man. Because like you said, they got nothing, and that is a part of the roster that you just can shuffle up every now and then, so then you don't get burnt when you automatically have to release a player. Like that just seemed like an absent-minded move, and I'm not going to bear anybody, especially when the guy's in his first year. But I think when you look at the Atlas and their struggles this year, a lot of it has to be a little bit of a disconnect between the talent that they have on roster and what they're being asked to do as far as it goes with in-game. And I think, that travels over to what you do with the player pool too. So I'm right there with you, Sides. Like that one, blew up our group chat when we're talking about different moves. We were like, how are you just going to let CVR walk for nothing? And you could argue if he was here in this game, you at least cover it. You at least cover that 1.5 for sure.
Yeah, and also talking about moves, we saw this week Miles Jones' debut on the Atlas. do we think he fit into the roster? I mean, the lineup. I think he had a goal, but it didn't really move the needle for me, to be honest.
Well, I think this team in general has had issues scoring all year. So similar to the Redwoods, where you're like, all right, let's try Romar and see what happens there. Same thing with Miles. It's like, let's see if Miles gives us a different look, or maybe this lights a fire under his ass. Yeah, he did have one goal, which was like an angry goal. That was like you just got traded goal.
Yeah, that was a few months of anger that he put down into the in the back of the twine on that one. But that move to me again, it kind of seemed like just wanting to shake things up for shaking things up. It wasn't like either of the guys were really making an impact on either or what they were doing on their team. And then if you look at what happened in that Redwoods game, with the that we're going to get into in just a few, but. There were some times when Romar just ripping shots at the cage could have ended up costing the Redwoods. So who won the trade? It seemed like maybe at least Miles getting that in the back of the net, an early win for the Atlas.
No, Neuby, I think you're absolutely right, and let's just get right into it. Unless you guys have anything else to say about that Atlas game, but yeah, the Redwoods Cannons game, the finale of the weekend, best game of the weekend by far, best for last. We had, everything in it. We had lead changes. We had a high-scoring game. This is the type of game that fans want to see, and it's the product the PLL wants to put out for sure. Very exciting game to watch, and like you mentioned, you saw some frustration shots from Romar, and I don't want to jump all the way into the end of the game, but I mean, he takes that 2-pointer in overtime that's just popcorn up and out the other way. Like I'm sure in his head he's like, if I can this, like it's going to be front page with PLL. And I mean, that is a shot, but I mean, I think a 2-pointer in overtime isn't the highest percentage shot you can take. But I mean, he's working out some frustrations for sure. The Redwoods in general, though, it was very much distributed offense. I think Cole Kirst is just continuing to play himself into a more important role in this Redwoods offense. He started the season, not dressing, gets worked into the lineup, and he's the highest scoring midi on the team. And I don't think he's the fastest midfielder on the team. I don't think he's the strongest midfielder on the team. I don't think he has the fastest shot. But you can just see how much he cares and how intense he is, and every play means so much to him. And he's rallying the troops around him, and it's great to see out of him as a rookie.
Curse reminds me when Connor Busick was first in the MLL, and all of a sudden, like, he'd be relatively quiet, and all of a sudden Busey would get pissed. Like, someone would slash him or something, and then all of a sudden he would just turn into a man and just truck stick, get to the goal. You couldn't stop him. Kirst has that in him, man. And I like watching his game. It is a bull in a china shop style of lacrosse. And I agree with you. He's just like, some people are just born leaders. And I think he's one of those guys who's going to work his way into being a captain in this league because he gives a shit. And he's talented and he's young. And just think about this 4 years from now with a guy who cares this much and is dedicated this much with the knowledge that he gets from playing a few seasons. I think this guy could be electric.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on that, and it goes back to, guys, what I was mentioning with Atlas, like losing Cade Van Raphorst. They could have covered the game if they had CVR. CVR ripped the 2-pointer in this one, so you take those 2 points, give them to the Atlas. Atlas covers, so you can tell I was on Atlas plus 1.5. I'm looking for any way to rationalize.
Newbie just laid on the couch and gave us a therapy session real quick. Hey, by the way, I want to give a shout out. Because more prevent face-off nonsense. The Cannons against TD were 2 for 27 when they were going out there with Ral and Reese, and then they put Hartzell out there, and Hartzell goes 60%. I think they found their new face-off guy. If they don't let Kyle Hartzell go out there and keep doing his thing out there. I mean, he's watched enough FOA clinics. He knows how to face off at this point. I think he'll be just fine.
That's fair.
But yeah, I mean, the Cannons are. I mean, it's kind of crazy because for me, this was my only loss of the weekend, and this one I still wasn't going to take the spread. Cannons at 1.5. I took the money line, and man, it came down to the very end. This looked like, what we're used to with the PLL kind of ending. But this once again, I think when I look at this this whole league right now, when I look at the standings and who's who, I have no problem taking the Archers money line against anybody in the league right now. I have no problem taking anybody's money line over the Chrome. The rest of it, I have to the other two games every week, I got to really think about it.
Well, and I'm glad that you mentioned that, because the reason why I was so bullish and absolutely loved this spot for the Redwoods is exactly what you're saying right there. Is in this league, when I see a team getting plus 145 on the money line, I automatically, my ears perk up. Like this week, and we're going to get into our previews, Chrome getting plus 150 on the money line against Redwoods. Now, that gives me a little bit of pause, but I thought this was a slam dunk spot. When nobody wants to bet on one team, all the talk about how cannons are rolling, so many straight games, they've covered so many straight games, all that noise just makes me want to go up to the counter and if I'm usually betting 1 unit, make it a 2-unit play on the other side. Because when there's all that noise, it can only go one of two ways. And this was a slam dunk spot for the Redwoods. And historically, when the Redwoods have no business winning a game is when they're going to do it.
Yep.
And last thing, I guess, that I want to get your guys' thoughts on is, I guess, more macro. It's about how the MVP is shaking out, because MVP odds are currently sitting at the exact same, depending on what book you look at. Marcus Holman, Tom Schreiber. Tom Schreiber was a favorite earlier in the day, but now they're plus 105, each of them on DraftKings. Holman gets them to overtime by getting 2 goals, both of them assisted by Nolting. But then, of course, Captain America, Schreiber continually has these highlight reels that he's putting on. So MVP, last year it was already racked up. We all thought Baptiste was the guy. I'm hoping that it's Holman, because I have a plus 1,500 on Holman to win MVP. Wow. But am I starting to have to sweat that? Because this race seems insanely close to me.
Yeah, I don't want to jinx it, so I will say that I think Shrives is going to win the MVP. I'm going to say it, put it out there just so you can keep your mojo going. But yeah, look, it's starting to shape up to be a 2-horse race.
That's what it seems.
And I think it's really going to come down to these last 2 games. And, the Cannons get to play. Holman gets to play against the Atlas defense this weekend. So that can only help. And then,
I'm
what's
wondering,
up,
when do they announce the MVP? Is it after the season or after the regular season?
I thought it was after the season. Like they announced it. It's varied from year to year, but I know it is considered a regular season award. So similar to other sports, but I'm not sure exactly when.
Yeah,
I remember in the MLL they used to announce it the bye week between the semis and the championship. I don't know what they're doing for the PL. I thought last year they announced it after the quarterfinals.
That's what I thought.
So if that's the case, I totally agree with you guys. I think what hurts Holman is how well Asher Nolting's playing too, because one kind of doesn't go without the other. They're definitely both mutually beneficial. I think they both have 35, 36 points, which I think if he's doing it on his own, maybe he gets the nod, but I think, they're kind of running as a 2-headed monster, and they're working so well together. You see, those kind of slip pick plays and those inside feeds that they had last week. Their chemistry is taken off this season to just another level. I think a dark horse is still Ryder Garnsey. I think, earlier in the season, he was, couldn't miss. He was shooting the ball 60%. The percentages kind of regress back to the mean where, you're going to have an off day shooting. But, he's still, I believe, he's second in goals just to Holman. He's one behind Holman with 23. Holman has 24. But, yeah, I think that's my dark horse. But then I think you guys are right. Schreiber, Holman. And like I said, I think just how well Nolting's doing hurts Holman's case just a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think if I had to look at those options, the one that is definitively the offense runs through him is Schreiber. So, the Archers aren't going to win games, especially in the playoffs, without Tommy Schreiber getting his points. The Redwoods have shown that they can score goals with other guys. And, Holman, like you said, if Ashton Olton goes off for 4 or 5 goals, which he can totally do, you could miss out on Holman getting his points. But I think the issue for Garnsey is, even though he's spectacular, and we're just talking MVP voting, and I don't have a vote, he might not be putting up the volume of scoring that Schreiber or Holman are. And I think that's where the votes are going to come from, not how awesome and ridiculous the goals are, just the volume of them.
Well, Greg, I have another question for you now that we're on this topic. I remember in our preseason preview, you really loved your boy Sis as Rookie of the Year.
I did.
And it's shaping out where, he's probably got the inside track a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, you'd be hard-pressed to show me. Because Kirst wasn't playing early in the season. If he had been, who knows? But I think, Sis coming in and being the second best face-off guy in the league statistically as a rookie is absolutely preposterous, even in this type of year, right? But I still think that, unless somebody shows up out of nowhere and does something ridiculous in the next week, I think you have to give it to Sis.
What about what Dordovic has put together, though? Because Dordovic, all the 2-pointers that he has, and, the whole potential narrative and can of worms you open if you give the face-off guy in a year where it gets so that I completely agree that it's one of those two guys. But even if you're just looking at odds, Tucker Dordovic is currently, you have to lay minus 180 to back Tucker Dordovic. Sis is plus 275 for Rookie of the Year right now.
Well, that's why I don't have a vote. Because you're like, he had 5 2-bombs.
Take every face
and
off
I'm like,
guy.
whoa,
Every face
5 2-bombs is really impressive. That's 5 shots. Sisselberger has like 200 face-off wins.
That's fair.
Those 5 shots were really cool, but can you do it 155 more times? No, so yeah, I guess you're right. I guess it's a 2-horse race then. And I might have a little bit of bias blinders on that, but that would have been cool for Sis to do that, but we'll see.
No, I think for what it's worth, to your point, I wouldn't be laying minus 180 on Tucker Dordovic right now. Like, if you didn't get in on Dordovic already, then you just don't bet him. Yeah. The only bet that you could make right now, I think, would be Sis, and at plus 275, I think it's closer than that gap between those two odds indicates, which would tell me there's some value on Sis for sure.
Yeah, and when you look at the last 2 weeks, Sis is playing. He's got Petey LaSalle, who had a real rough day against Rowlett last week, and then he's going to have the Water Dogs. So
that's a 30 for 30 game.
Yeah, that's another 30 for 30 game. So
this is an auto game.
He's going to be one of 4 guys to break my record this year. So yeah, he's probably going to end up around 75%.
Yeah.
Well, with that being said, fellas, that wraps up our recap from Denver. It's always great to see those games go out to Denver, and I love, we didn't barely even touch on the throwbacks. The second year in a row they did it out in Denver. It's just such a cool atmosphere. The fans are right on the field. They always pack it out. So, always a great weekend out there, and it was just great lacrosse. And that moves us along to next week, Seattle. And correct me if I'm wrong, is this a new location this year?
Yeah, they're not back in that Tacoma dome that they were in, so they will be playing. They will be playing outdoors here. So that is something to mention for sure. But yeah, it does kind of seem like at least the location is going to be new. They had gone to Washington prior, but it wasn't Seattle.
Well, it's a homecoming for some of those players. I think Dordovic's from out there, so maybe that's a little insight to maybe why he's minus 180. But we got some great games on the docket. Some really important games. We talked about kind of the chaos in the middle of the standings right now. We're going to hope to see, maybe some people emerge and see how these kind of seeding is going to shake out for when playoff time rolls around. We have 2 weeks left in the season, and, our first game for next week is a big one. I think it's the biggest game of the weekend, and it's Archers versus Whipsnakes. Archers team who's rolling, Whipsnakes team, they're rolling as well, and it's almost like it's a little brother game, I feel like, where the Whips have been the guys for the existence of the PLL. And the Archers have always been kind of nipping at their heels, just kind of coming up short every year. Now the Archers are in the driver's seat. They're 7-1. Whips are 4-4. This might be, finally the time that little brother has enough and kicks Big Bro's ass, or I don't know. What do you guys think? The line right now for the game is Archers minus 1.5, but the juice is plus 100, and over-unders 24.5.
I am not touching the spread against the Whips. If I did anything, I would go either money line Archers or plus 1.5 whips. The money line is 140 for the Archers, and the plus 1.5 is 130 for the whips. So it doesn't really make you leap one way or the other. I mean, like I said, I'm taking the Archers money line. I think they're the best team in the league. I love that the Whips are definitely going to push for a championship run because all their pieces are back. This game is going to be electric, regardless of what happens. We're going to get a traditional face-off battle. We're going to get two great offenses versus two great defenses. So, I'm really interested to see how this. I mean, the goal differential. Whip Snakes have a slightly more goals given up because of, to be honest, I mean, their pieces just weren't there. So, yeah, I mean, I'm going to take the Archers money line on this.
Yeah, I think if you do like the Archers, that's the way to go, because I think this is going to be a one-score game, honestly. Like, sometimes you can just feel it, and I feel it, which is why if you're telling me I can get plus 1.5 at only minus 130, so you're paying an extra 20 cents a juice from your typical minus 110, I got to go with that plus 1.5 for the Whips, because it's a game that I think they could win outright. And before the game earlier this year where Archers beat the Whips prior to that, since we've been tracking lines since 2021, Whips were 3-0 straight up against Archers. They were 3-0 against the spread against Archers as well. So, maybe that Archers we gotcha already happened, and the Whips are just rolling. Like, they look really good, and they're not going to be a type of team that's just going to roll over like the Archers got to face last week. So, I guess this is good news for you, Beast, because when I come on here, my plays usually lose. But I would be looking at Whips plus the 1.5, and a little sprinkle on that money line at plus 110 would be the look for me. So a little head-to-head here right out of the gate.
You know what, Dan? I'm on your side, too. I think, the one-goal game is speaking to me. I think this is actually going to be a lower-scoring game. I think we kind of get caught up sometimes in watching the highlights, watching how prolific the offensive players are on each team. But that makes us forget sometimes how freaking good the defense and the goaltending is. And I think that the way both these young goalies are playing in Dobson and Krebs, and I think these defenses really have it figured out too. I think it's going to be, a real back and forth low-scoring game where maybe 10-9, 11-10. So I'm liking the under, and I'm liking the sprinkle on Whips money line.
So it's us against Greg on this one.
Yeah,
so,
2v1.
Beast,
if there's anything in life that I'm used to,
that will just
being one.
Say hello from the other side to you. We'll just say hello there.
That's a new feature.
That is unbelievable.
You had that queued up. Did
you see my face? I was so confused. I was like,
you was like, shit, did I open up a video?
I don't even have Apple iTunes on my computer. What's going on?
I got wild shit in this board over here.
Man, well done. I got to be on my toes now.
Greg thought that was your ringtone.
Oh man, no, I agree on the under, but definitely, I think what, if the Archers were undefeated right now, I would take the Whips, and I would take the Whips probably money line.
For you, Greg, what's the difference maker that puts the Archers over the top here on beating the Whip Snakes?
One is they've been vibing for a very long time. Two, they've won a few close games. They've won. Their face-off, like Sisselberger is playing like he's a 3-year vet. Goaltending-wise, defensively, they've been super solid all season. I mean, 86 goals against. I mean, that's phenomenal. So the final key is they have lost a game. So they have felt defeat, and I feel like they've have this game circled because regardless of, like we talked about, regardless of how well the Water Dogs were last year and this year, it's still, the Whips are still in your head, right? It's like no matter how far removed right now from Tom Brady we are, teams still go out to try to beat Bill Belichick they circle that game on the calendar. So same thing. I think for the Archers, they're like, are we here or what? Like, this is our moment. And for the Whip Snakes, they're going to come out and be like, we're back and we're who we usually are. So I just think this is going to be a one-goal game, and I think the Archers are going to be over the top. And the biggest reason is, in my opinion, the MVP, Tom Schreiber.
There you go. You heard it here first. We're splitting the sides right now, but it's like we said. This is going to be a fantastic game to watch. If you're going to watch any game this weekend, this is a great one. It's that
Agreed.
you got that transition period on the East Coast. It's a 9 p.m. game, so finish up your happy hour drinks. Sit down to pregame and pop this sucker on, and you'll enjoy it for sure.
I'll be on my second pizza by then.
Oof.
Next
Love
game,
that for you.
11:30 p.m. Late one. Atlas plus 1.5 versus the Cannons. You're getting minus 110 for the Atlas plus 1.5. The over/under is 25.5. That's a high one, and the Atlas money line is plus 130. For me, I mean, I'm just going to jump right off the bat here. This over 25.5, they're begging you to take the under.
Begging.
That's a trap line if I've ever seen one. And over is minus 120 and under is minus 110, which is, they're begging you to take that under. I'm riding with the over. I think there's going to be a lot of goals. The Atlas, defensively, we talked about, they're missing some pieces on poles and, matchup-based defense hasn't been great. I think Jack Concannon's had a little bit of a frustrating season. I know they put Porter in for him a little bit. He won the job back. I know he didn't play up to his standards last week. And then the Cannons, we talked about their offense. They're scoring a shit ton of goals. They have Nolting and they have Holman, who just are the Bash Bros out there and lighting teams up. How are you guys feeling on this? Dan, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you, man. It's just like you look at that total and it's set so well because, I could see this being right around the 26 goals. Anecdotally, too, I'm glad you mentioned how people forget about how good defenses are because just heading into this weekend, I think there's just an interesting scheduling note where you have these games starting at 9 o'clock Eastern time. You have these games starting at 11:30 Eastern time. So, from a player perspective, I kind of wanted to pick your guys' brains on, is there any element of that screwing with your internal body clock, or these guys are on the road so much like it doesn't even matter? You know what I mean? Like
I can tell you from experience,
body clock.
Adrenaline trumps everything.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I wanted to know because anecdotally, I look at this 11:30 start, I look at the high total, and I want to make a case for the under. But my dumb ass made a case in an under for an Atlas game the last time I came on Beast. I'm not doing it again.
Well,
the only way I would look is towards the over.
These two teams played each other in week 4. 30 combined goals.
Yeah.
Okay? This
changed,
So, you could look at this and say, okay, so did each defense learn something? Are they going to play them differently? That's going to create a wrinkle. You could say that, but the Atlas are also missing, I think, 2 of those starters from the last time they played. So,
Exactly.
you're right. They're begging you. I might wait to see if that line moves down 1 goal, and
Agreed.
then I
Or
would
wait
pounce
to
all
see
over
the
it.
other books that it comes out on. Because one thing that I have noticed is FanDuel and DraftKings, they haven't been simpatico always on how they're lining these games. And if you're telling me I can get the 24.5, I like that a hell of a lot better than 25.5 because I'm with Sibes on this one that is just a rat line through and through. So honestly, as far as anything that I'm betting here as we're recording early in the week, I'm waiting to bet anything in this game. I would rather lay a little juice either way to potentially get a better number than bet it early in the week and get burned.
In
I
terms
will
of-
say, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of the head-to-head or the spread, Atlas plus 1.5, Cannons minus 1.5, I'm not even touching it. I talked about last week, or about
It's
the
a
game
coin
last
flip.
week. Trevor is always going to be an X factor. The Cannons, they're going to, I guess Hartzell's the new face-off guy. They're going to roll out Hartzell. Trevor's going to go 95% against him, I can promise you. I don't care if Hartzell just went 60%. He's going to go 95%. That's a difference.
Look, TD's a very good face-off guy. He's not Trevor. So, yeah, Trevor's a whole different animal. But
So that makes me just want to stay away from that. I like the total here. And then, Dan, just your point about the timing, and I agree with Greg, the adrenaline, but also I think, coaches will push everything back. You have a 9:30 wake-up instead of an 8 a.m. wake-up. You have your breakfast a little bit later, your walkthroughs a little bit later. You get back to the hotel, you take a nap, you wake up from that nap. It doesn't even matter what time it is. You're ready to play.
Gotcha.
yeah, for me, actually, this isn't that hard. I think that I'm going to take the 1.5 for Cannons, the minus 1.5. You're having a bounce back game, a team that's been playing well all season, and yes, Trevor is going to go 85% this year. but he just went 80% with 3 goals, and they still lost by a bunch of points. So Trevor can only do so much. That defense is not getting better unless they miraculously get a. And the other thing too on their when you're winning that many faceoffs, you only got 30 seconds. They're not scoring at a high clip after the initial faceoff win. So as long as you don't let Trevor just run past you and score, I feel good about the Cannons being able to put up points because their counterattack after that initial 30 seconds, their full 52 after that has been very good. Yeah. And I am going to wait on the OU to see if it creeps. If it gets to 24.5, jumping all over that over. I might not touch it if it doesn't move because I could see this game being 25 goals. But I'm comfortable taking the Cannons at -1.5.
You're a braver man than me, Greg.
Yeah. Well, I have kids, so nothing scares me anymore.
Well, let's roll on over to the Saturday games. First one is Chrome versus Redwoods. Chrome +1.5 is at +105. Over-under is low at 22.5. We're sure that's because the Chrome have only scored 5 goals the past 2 weeks. Are we shocked to not see a +2.5 line here again?
No.
I think it has to be. Yeah, I think the reason why we don't see the 2.5 is because the team that they're playing in Redwoods. For what it's worth, this is actually the first game this season that the Redwoods have even been favorites. This is the first time that the Redwoods aren't getting a goal and a half, which is what gives me a little bit of pause. But this is a game, again, that I wouldn't bet until late on Friday night because I'm looking at what happens in that Atlas and Cannons game. If Atlas pulls up the upset and Chrome basically has nothing to play for, that changes the way that I would be looking at this game a hell of a lot more. Because if Chrome, is scoreboard watching, then they roll into this game just thinking like, Atlas won last night, what do we really have? Before that, if you take that factor out of it, I just find it really tough that the Redwoods are now -195 on the money line as they're favorites for the first time. I get how bad Chrome has been. I understand that. But it's not like the Redwoods have been the most amazing team in the league prior to last week, and it took overtime to get it done albeit against the Cannons. Again, this would be a game that I wouldn't bet until I know what happens with that Atlas and Cannons game because it will tell you a lot about the Chrome's motivation potentially in this spot. I do just think it's interesting to see a 22.5, and I get it. It's because the low scoring from Chrome, but this is only the second time we've seen a 22.5 this season. So much like that 25.5 begging you to take the under, I feel like this is begging you to take the over, which I know it's boring, guys, but I think this is a sheer pass game until I know what happened. I got nothing.
And the -195 money line for the Redwoods is just far too expensive. It's far too expensive.
It's laughable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're a bigger favorite last week than teams who were potentially laying 2.5 goals. 195 in this league is I never lay that. That's a horrible bet, even if the Redwoods win.
I think you're going to have a real face-off matchup. Connor Farrell, second in the league against TD. I feel very good about the -1.5 spread about the Redwoods. The Redwoods are a solid team that stumbles sometimes when they're not supposed to and plays a little bit better, plays like themselves in like last week. I think that's what they're capable of. Now, I feel actually great about the under in this because even if the Redwoods put up 15 goals, I still don't see them going over. And the Redwoods haven't been putting up 15 goals usually. I feel pretty good because here's the other thing too. This is 1 of 2 games, right? The Chrome are playing this game, like you said. They look up at the scoreboard and they see that the Atlas won the game before. This team could completely implode. And the Redwoods run away by 8 goals. But still, if I'm going into this game and I'm thinking like a professional lacrosse player, I'm studying. I want to be not everybody is like that though. And there might be a couple of guys on that team that are like, we got to outscore the teams we're playing by 15 or 17, and we need the Redwoods the Atlas to stumble. That's a hell of a thing to be in the back of your mind when you're diving for that extra ball.
You make a good point though, Greg, because I know we like to joke about tanking for Brendan O'Neill, but in the PLL, how competitive it is for a roster spot. These guys are playing for their jobs. I don't care if they're 1-7. I don't care if the coaching staff wants Brendan O'Neill next year. If someone's in the 19-man roster, they're going to play like their life depends on it because they want to be on the team next year. So
Yes,
they don't want to be
so
treading water in the player pool.
So that is absolutely true. And I would never think that a player isn't going to play as hard as he can. But here's the caveat. You and I are playing together for the Redwoods, or for the Chrome right now. As a team, we have a game plan that we have to stick to in order to beat this team. When you are playing specifically for your roster spot, rather than to win the game because it means everything to you, you get a product that looks similar to the Under Armour All-Star game than it does to the state championship game, right? So it doesn't mean I'm going to play any less, but maybe I take that extra shot when in a real game, in a playoffs, I would pass the ball through X. So, and look, we've seen in sports where that actually plays well for that team because guys are scoring where they never would have even tried to, and all of a sudden they'd run the goals up. I don't think it's going to happen against the Redwoods. I respect their defense too much, and I respect the Chrome's defense enough to say, look, I don't think these teams are going to combine for 23 goals. But I do think that the Redwoods, after getting that game last week, can believe in themselves after a trade where everyone was like, what's going on? I think they can get this second one. If there's anyone who's going to capitalize on what just happened, it's Nat St. Laurent. He will get that team ready to rock and roll and come out and say, look, here's our chance. We could go on a run here because we're only one game back from second place. So, that's just where my head's going.
Yeah, and I guess, Danny, last thing on this this game because, it's kind of boring if I'm just like, I don't really like anything. One thing I would look towards, and it harkens back to something you were talking about earlier with Garnsey being a potential dark horse. I'm hoping because Garnsey has had 3 points in 3 straight games, we get a potential 3.5 total points on Garnsey. Because last week he had 11 shots. Like, he is gunning to get back in that conversation. I think against a Chrome team who we're talking about, maybe if Atlas wins, they're not as excited. Maybe they don't go as hard. This could be a Ryder Garnsey 5-goal game. So early look for me. Whenever the line comes out, I'm going to keep refreshing my app. I'm blindly going on Ryder Garnsey over this week because I think it ties into everything that we've talked about on this pod regarding the Redwoods and regarding the Chrome so far. That's a Garnsey spot, in my opinion.
No, I agree. I think him shooting 1 for 9 or whatever it was last week isn't the norm for him, and he was getting good looks. I think watching the game, he took maybe one frustrated shot where he was kind of backpedaling. It was low shot clock, and he threw a low to low. But, I mean, he's getting good looks. He's going to can them. Him shooting 1 for 9 is not the normal. But I love that take. And it's so funny. You got the player props. I don't get them in New York on DraftKings. So
it's brutal. So it's like a state by state regulation thing. Everyone who I talk to, they say like one of the worst place to bets currently is New York.
And I think if I went over to New Jersey, I could do it. I could probably.
You could, yeah. So all you have to. That's what I used to do. So my girlfriend used to live in Manhattan. I used to literally drive over and just get into Hoboken and place my bets in Hoboken and then go back. So it does work. Yeah. So that now you know.
Wow, dude. And might have to get a 1-800 number for you, man.
Yeah. No, it's smart. It's smart. Work smarter, not harder. Yeah. It's a quick path ride,
Yeah, man. Look, we've all done that ride.
$1.
Amen.
Well, last game of the weekend, we have Chaos versus Water Dogs. Last season championship rematch. Water Dogs, Chaos, both. I think they both want this game. I think this is a big springboard game for the rest of the season, for the last week of the season, for the playoffs. We have Water Dogs sitting at -1.5 plus 110. Water Dogs money line -130. Chaos money line plus 100. We have the over/under set at 24.5. Fellas, this game is another one that's hard for me to pick either side. I think that if I were to pick, the plus numbers jump out at me. They make my eyes a little bit wider, and I just do Water Dogs -1.5 for that +110 or the Chaos money line at +100. I don't know which one I'm leaning towards right now. Maybe one of you guys will convince me one way or the other. Greg, how you feel about this game?
This is the toughest one of the weekend for me, to be honest. I always keep going back to people sleeping on the Water Dogs because they think that we're talking about the Water Dogs of the other years that they didn't win the championship, and I still feel like they don't get any love. The last time these two teams played was way back in week 1. It was an overtime game, 8-7, absolute barn burner. Water Dogs won, and I think the OU on this is actually kind of high for what I think is going to happen in this game. It's 24.5. But these teams are so even that it's nuts.
I was just going to say their goal differentials
Yep.
are almost the same. One's 5 and one's 3.
Now, Nick Rowlett has the ability to win a faceoff and get the Chaos the ball, and that Chaos offense can move it quickly and score off of that initial fast shot clock. The Water Dogs are going to sit back and prevent, and they're going to do what they've been doing. I might go Chaos +1.5 because I think the Dogs are going to win by 1 again, and I'm almost certainly going to take the under of this game because I feel like both defenses are good, both goalies are good, and it's going to be I think it's going to be a very physical, beat the crap out of each other type of game.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And as far as this game goes, I would probably lean towards Water Dogs money line at -130. I don't really love that, like Danny. I like getting plus money on my bets, or only laying the customary -110. But for me, this comes down to like the Chaos. They have an X next to their name now. You know what I mean? Like they're in the playoffs, and so do the Water Dogs. But the Chaos are the kind of team like they don't give a shit what their seeding is. However, when you look at the Water Dogs championship run last year, how important was it having the path that they had to that championship, and more importantly, having the bye week? Now, I don't think that they could potentially catch the Archers and leapfrog them and get that guaranteed bye. But I think these games down the stretch, just as far as a team philosophy go, matter as far as wins and losses go. I'm not saying that the Chaos don't care about the game. I'm not saying that they're not going to go out there and make it the battle that Greg expects it to be and that I agree with him it will be. However, when it gets down to those waning moments, I think this game matters just a little bit more to the Water Dogs than the Chaos, and that's why I would lean that way as far as a betting perspective. I just think at this point in the year, the Chaos already having an X next to their name, like they're sitting pretty. They accomplished what they wanted to do. They just want to get into the dance and then make people pay. They like being counted out. They like having a tough role. That's just their marketing. It's the way that it fits in with what they do, philosophy wise. So as far as in season, I think this is just more of a Water Dog spot than it is a Chaos spot.
I hear you loud and clear, and I think it goes back to kind of what Greg was saying, where the Water Dogs still aren't getting the love that customary teams coming off championships get. They still almost have that underdog mentality from the the lacrosse Twitterverse, which is always spot on. But,
Yeah, always. Never really rational people.
Yeah. But so I think it's a tough one for me. I think that's the smart play. You said, Water Dogs money line. That's a smart play. For me, I'll take the 1.5 to get the plus 100. Have my money work a little bit harder for me. But
agreed.
I'm looking actually at the PLL website right now, and I don't know what model they're using. I don't know what stats they're plugging in, but we might have to ask our boy Keegs about this. It's showing playoff probability. It has the Archers at a 99% chance to make the semifinals because they get the first round bye, right?
Yeah.
And then it says the Atlas have the next best chance of making the semifinals at 81.3%. That has to be a mistake. Am I right?
I mean, will anybody over there admit it was if it was?
I
I think
fair question.
there's reality and there's optics, Sibes.
Look, I'm sharing my screen with you right now so you guys can see exactly what I'm looking at. I see right here,
Yeah.
Atlas.
FarmersOnly.com. You got to close that tab, man.
What are you doing, bro?
I'm not even going to say anything. But we right here, we have Atlas at 81.3% to make the semifinals. The next closest is Cannons at 68.1%. That is crazy to me. I don't know what numbers they're running there.
I think they've just been watching the show and they agree with me that they're going to get in over the Chrome.
I mean, I guess it has to have something to do with potential goal differential. But if you look at that, they're minus 14 in goal differential. So does past matchups go into that? How they would face off against teams. Because I'm with you, that does seem a little bit head scratching. You would think people who are higher up in the rankings are going to be higher up there, but I mean, who knows? That's why the only numbers that I run are calculating spreads. Like when you get into percentages and implied probability, like that's more of a Hutton Jackson question.
Yeah.
Because this shit makes my head hurt even looking at percentages. So how they calculate it, I don't know, but it doesn't sound right to me, Sibes.
Maybe the model's still taking into account the 52-second shot clock, not the 30 off the face-off.
Yeah, it's lagging. That has to be it. That's
Last year's model. We need to update it. But, yeah, I just saw that. That was interesting to me. I'm sure there's a reason behind it.
Yeah,
it goes back to me thinking the way I bet the Atlas. I always am betting the Atlas because I always value the ball. If you have the ball, right, and they're getting the ball. So I think that just shows when I said a couple weeks ago when the whipstakes only had a couple wins, you'd be remiss not to just throw a couple bucks on them for future.
Yeah.
Why not throw a couple bucks on the Atlas right now? You get.
Well, it must be a rise up driven algorithm. That's the only explanation of why it's so.
I hate that we move the needle so much.
Well, right now
I know.
on DraftKings,
You gotta
you can get the Atlas at plus 850 to win the championship. If throw $10 on it, why not? You put your lunch money on it. You could buy your girlfriend a nice steak dinner.
Yeah.
Hey, and there also are other ways to bet it too. And I know we went a little long here, so I won't go crazy macro. But essentially, what I do on a day-to-day basis is try and make it so that at the end of the day, my bets are like a stock portfolio where I'm negating a lot of my risk and having a potential high upside. So what I like to do is check out FanDuel. They have some more exotic offerings as far as playoffs go. So you can get things like name the finalists and sure, it seems like it's a little bit more needle in the haystackish, but now that the bracket is starting to come into form, a team that's going to play each other in the first round, if you have a ticket with those two teams to make the finals against each other, it's a dog shit ticket. But once these things start coming into form and you like the Atlas, instead of just putting on the plus 150, you could have Atlas versus Whip Snakes, Atlas versus Chaos, Atlas Red Wads. So you can have any of those matchups, and the lowest odds that you have on any of those are plus 3,000. So 30-1 essentially, and that's an Atlas Whip Snakes matchup. So if you like them to make the championship, instead of asking for them just to win it, I would maybe try and find a different way, because at plus 850, yeah, it's a nice steak dinner, but you could be talking, a part ownership in Fogo de Chao if you end up hitting one of those 3,000.
Part ownership.
You know what I mean?
Alex Smith will have something to say about that.
I love it.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. That's a great point, too. Shopping around for some better lines. I know you mentioned that earlier about the 24, 25 over-under. But, yeah, no, I guess I'm just far too loyal to DraftKings. I got to expand my horizons.
I respect that.
I'm just too lazy to open up another platform.
That's my biggest suggestion for people who are listening in, for the advice that you guys give. Because, Beast, you do a terrific job. If you have other outs, it is whenever I'm talking to pro bettors, that's their number one tip is the more outs that you have, the better, because that minus 110 versus minus 120 and getting a half point could be the difference between being profitable at the end of the year and losing a little bit of coin as well. So recreationally, having one bet is fine. Having one book is fine. But, always take the best number if you can. It would be the suggestion that I would give for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well,
or just go to Hoboken. whichever.
Or just go to
Whichever
Hoboken.
team.
That always helps too. Hop on the path. Tell them I sent you. There'll be Dunbar and Santiago on the corner. Then just tell them I sent you.
that.
They
Do
got
you bake in your $5 round trip into your profit at the end of the day?
Yeah, I just have one of the cards. You don't even think about it when it's the card. It's like the easy pass. You know what I mean? You're just like, it's reloading anyway.
Absolutely.
That's calling money.
Well,
That doesn't
well,
count.
fellas, this has been a great episode. We just, have just some fantastic lacrosse in front of us. We're really going to see how this playoff picture is going to shape out. I love that first game of the weekend, Archers versus Whipsnakes. It's going to be a bloodbath. I think it's going to be similar to that Cannons Redwoods game we saw last weekend. I'm pumped to watch these games. Stay up late, crack a beer, have a good time, invite your buddies over. But I can't wait till next week. We can tap in to see how we did, if we won some money or we took it on the chin. But regardless, we're going to enjoy some great lacrosse, and that's what's most important.
Yeah, fellas. Let's sit back and enjoy it. Earn your pizza the rest of the week. And I'll see you guys in the winner's circle.
Thanks for coming on again, Dan. This has been a blast. This is episode 40 of Rise Up the Podcast. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, make sure you hit that subscribe button, leave a review. And if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the TorchPro YouTube channel. And we will be here with you for the duration of the PLL season, breaking down these games, giving you our predictions, and giving you the inside scoop as to who is going to win this championship and how this season is going to unfold. Fellas, I will talk to you next week.
Peace.